Here's 5 ways that you can listen into amateur radio. This could be interesting if you're possibly curious about entering the hobby. The first way doesn't need any radio equipment at all. In fact, you're watching it right now. Go onto YouTube and you'll sometimes see live amateurs having contacts on the air. Have a look at those live sessions and you can get a feel for what ham radio sounds like. For instance, I know that Callum, M0MCX, does that, Hayden, VK7HH, during various contests, and if you aren't around when someone's doing it live, you can always watch a recording. This can help if you're studying for your ham license test or just want to learn about operating procedure. Second thing you can do is to use an online SDR. SDR stands for Software Defined Radio. Some are in good locations, some are in poor locations. But if you pick a SDR that's in the middle of the desert, where there's very little local noise and interference, then you'll hear stations from a long way away, even halfway across the world. And if you want to see how conditions are like in other countries, then jump onto an SDR in those areas as well. Just go to the Kiwi SDR website and you'll be able to search for SDRs by country. There's hundreds and hundreds of them, so you'll soon be able to get an appreciation of what HF listening is like. And some SDRs do VHF, so you might be able to hear local VHF activity also. There's a bit of a knack to it. If you just randomly go to an SDR, then you'll need to know what frequencies to listen to and where the activity is for the time of day. A popular amateur radio band is 7 MHz, so a 7 to 7.3 or 7 to 7.2 in some countries. SSB voice mode is most often used, lower sideband, although there's also Morse code and digital modes. Anyway, if you have a tune around a band like 7 MHz or maybe 14 MHz as well, 14 to 14.350, 3.5 to 4 or 3.5 to 8, 3.5 to 3.7, they all vary a little bit by country, but if you are sitting at home on the internet, you can use an online SDR and get an idea of what the amateur radio bands sound like. Just go to the Kiwi SDR website for a good example.
CQ, hello, CQ, Victor Kilo 1, Tango, Tango, Yankee, Victor, Kilowatt 1, Tokyo, Yokohama. VK3 Japan Radio. VK3 Japan Radio. Good morning. Name here is Tim, Tango, India, Mike. Tokyo, Italy, Mexico is the name. I'm located in Sale, Sugar, America, Lima, Ecuador, Southeastern VK3.
Number 3, and this is where you're actually getting your own receiver, is to get something like this. This is an RTL 2832 SDR dongle. It can plug into your computer in the USB, and you have an antenna plugged in here, and you can get radio signals from around your neighborhood or a bit further. The RTL SDRs, the cheaper types, do the VHF UHF range for amateur radio frequencies, 144 to 148 or 144 to 146. That's the amateur 2 meter band, and there's also the 70 centimeter band around 430 megahertz. If you set this up, you can get software called SDR Sharp. I've done some videos on that. Then you can be casually tuning across, or better still, have the display. When there's a big spike on the display, then that's where a signal is. If you want to hear signals, then FM voice is the most common mode, although there's also single sideband. It's a good idea to get an idea of activity in your area. You can either just be looking at a screen and seeing where columns pick up, there's a spike, and then you move the pointer to where it is and tune in a signal. Or you can set up frequencies that you're often used in an area, like repeater or simplex frequencies. You can get lists on Amateur Radio Club websites of local activity in your area. And bear in mind that there isn't always continuous amateur activity, so there might be times when you turn on and not find anyone transmitting. Other times there might be quite a lot of activity. So that covers the VHF UHF range. You can get some SDR dongles that cover HF as well, and that's where you can pick up signals from all around the world. In both cases though, you need a good antenna. The antenna that come with these is normally pretty poor. It's just like a little thing about this tall. You need a good outdoor antenna. If it's 3 or 4 meters high with some good coaxial cable, something like a quarter wave vertical on 144 megahertz would be fine. And it will also be okay for other signals like aircraft band around 120, 130 megahertz as well. And it will also be okay on UHF for that matter. And there's other non-amateur frequencies you can hear. So yeah, it doesn't cost very much. You can get them online, a SDR dongle, and you can get the software like SDR Sharp, which is free, and then you can be listening to amateurs and other people on the VHF UHF spectrum. So highly recommended. Another thing that doesn't cost very much and you want to receive VHF UHF FM is a radio like this. This is a Baofeng handheld. It actually transmits as well as receive, so that when you go and get your amateur license, then you've also got a radio to use on the air. But this will cover FM mode on 144 and 432 megahertz. So main thing is to make sure that you've got the repeaters, which are basically transmitters on hilltops that retransmit signals over a much wider area. That's where a lot of the activity is, and you put them in as memory channels and you set the radio to scan, and when there's activity it will stop on a busy frequency and you'll hear the conversation. If you're more interested in worldwide reception, or even within 200, 300, 500 kilometers, there's a lot of activity on HF. You need a portable shortwave receiver. Ideally, it should cover frequencies from 1.6 to 30 megahertz. They also normally have AM and FM broadcast bands as well. Most important thing is for amateur reception is it's got a BFO, or beat frequency oscillator. That allows you to receive single sideband and Morse code signals. If you don't have the beat frequency oscillator, you won't be able to resolve those signals. Anyway, this is a small portable receiver. I've reviewed it in a previous video, but yeah, you can take it around. It's got a telescopic whip antenna like this, but you might want to put some wire onto it to get better signals. And it's better that you're using it outside, or better still, in a park where there's less radio frequency interference. But yeah, a small radio like this can pick up signals all over the world. And again, frequencies I mentioned before, like 7, 3.5, 14 megahertz, are good places to try. And again, you want to be listening in SSB mode. Finally, the fifth thing you can do is to build a receiver. If you're an electronics tinkerer, then that might be more appealing for you. It's easier to build receivers for HF frequencies or shortwave, bands like 3.5 or 14 or 7 megahertz, and you might not get as good reception as with a commercially made receiver, but it can be a lot of fun to hear the first signals on a receiver you've built yourself. And you can also pick up international shortwave stations as well. So yeah, 5 ways of receiving amateur radio transmissions. First of all is to just jump on YouTube, see if anyone is doing a live session, so you can hear them making contacts on the air. Secondly, to use a web SDR like Kiwi SDR, so you can just tune a remote receiver. Thirdly, you can use a dongle, plugs into your computer, and with an outdoor antenna you can hear signals, mostly VHF and UHF, but also HF if you've got the right type. Fourthly, using special, commercially made equipment like Baofeng handheld or a portable shortwave receiver. And last, you can build your own if you want. So that's it for now. Let me know in the comments below, how did you start hearing amateur radio operators on the air? And if you've got any other ideas, then I'd love to hear them as well.